This place is weird. I mean, I don't know why they drew so many marks. It looks like an optical illusion. Especially in this bright sunlight. I'm not sure what they mean by so many lines. It's kind of irritating to the eyes. I don't know how it looks on the camera. But anyways, I'm glad that it's over. It's so damn hot today that you can actually see mirages on the highway. Looks like some water. It's the refraction because of the heat. Section of the highway is kind of bumpy, so the bike's bouncing up and down. This is the NH6. Have to be careful. That phenomenal wind blast is now rocking my head back and forth. Especially happens on the top of the flyovers because you're higher and obviously there's more wind. You know, for smaller capacity motorcycles, having a naked bike is more than sufficient because really wind blast is not a bother up to 140 150 kilometers, but beyond that it becomes really intolerable. So on a motorcycle like Duke, where we are usually cruising at 120 130, and I know the top speed is much higher, but usually you don't go there because you don't want to max out your engine and stay in that speed for a long time. But on this bike, on the other hand, 150 is nothing, and beyond that even the bike is way far away from its maximum speed of 240 or 50 kilometers per hour. So you're carrying higher speeds and you have to deal with the wind blast. Moving this bike through corners is pretty decent. I mean, those highway curves are Oh wow, I just tested out the brakes, and I think I just activated the ABS, not sure why, but the front did make a very screechy sort of sound. And yeah, under hard braking this bike did move around a lot, and I guess that's got more to do with the softer front suspension. I remember braking on the Street Triple RS, and though the brakes are good on this bike, the overall balancing, I think with this motorcycle you have to be feeding in the rear brake a little bit as well, because with this time I wasn't really skidding, but the ABS got activated, and I think the ABS got activated, I'm not 100% sure, but there was a weird tire screeching sound, and maybe a little bit of rear brake as well you need. But braking is good on this bike. The suspension could have been a lot better, the front end dive and all that under hard braking, it's definitely there. And this being a 210 kg motorcycle, it's not exactly light, so you remember that the momentum will be higher and your brakes would have to work harder. It's a 300 dual 300 brake, dual 300 Nissan 4 piston calipers braking system, and I'm not gonna complain about it. I've braked on Nissan before, they're pretty good, but yeah, a little bit more feedback from the front and a little less time would be awesome. Now that I'm riding it on bumpy roads, I see that this bike, because the front end is so light, it has the tendency to rise up, and that's been happening ever since I've been accelerating. And on a less bumpier highway like the NH2 where we were riding initially, that was pretty fun actually. I was enjoying that. So obviously if you're riding anywhere out of India where your roads are not at all bumpy, you would enjoy the front wheel rising up. But here on a bumpy road, when the wheel is going back down on the road, same thing happened with the Ducati. It goes down on a bump, and then the motorcycle kind of destabilizes it, and that is not a good feeling, and that's mostly due to the condition of our roads. So you have to remember that the front end feel and is, you know, for the cornering sides, I'd say the front end feel is definitely good enough, but because of the weight distribution, this bike's again a 50-50 sort of weight distribution, the front end's kind of lifting up and does have a lot of power. Those bumps, you know, rattling my soul. Very bad condition of the highway. bike has a tendency to go airborne. I'm trying to avoid that. And you know, riding on such roads definitely improves your riding skill because you're constantly learning how to stabilize the motorcycle against all these bumps. But obviously you can't go as hard as you want because the bike that's moving around too much. I remember riding the Hayabusa on this, and on that bike this feeling was even worse. The Hayabusa is a heavier bike, it does sit on the highway with more poise. Oh man, that completely slammed me. That bump was so hard. It's the worst thing about this highway, man. Maintaining a speed is so difficult. Lane got blocked. Well, when you're doing progressive braking, I don't really mind the feel and anything, but under hard braking it is having a tendency to destabilize. And the ABS, you know, it's there, it's definitely there, but the way it's engaging is different than what I faced before. And if on the previous braking I engaged the ABS on a slight scale, I would say that yeah, it does kick in very late, and sudden people trying to cross lanes. This is the story of Indian highways, nothing new about it. So the way it holds the line through a corner is pretty decent. But the problem is if you have to go evasive braking out of the corner, and out of the corner acceleration I would say is also easier because the power delivery is progressive. You can pull out of the corner faster, whereas on the Panigale I was having the fear that the front end will rise up, and on this bike it also does, but a little less, considering it's heavier and less powerful, and well, the power delivery is kind of more gradual for an inline 4. Still, this is having more low and mid-range punch on the inline 4 than the other Z800. It feels a lot more powerful than the Z800, to be honest, and that's more because of the weight that it lost, and obviously having more displacement. Now they have the power available right on a lower RPM, which feels good. You know, peak power is one thing, but the power curve, which you can check on a dyno, that is actually the real measurement of power, because you're not always at the peak power RPM. So how it feels on the other RPMs, that is what makes you feel that the motorcycle is powerful or not. Or something which has a good peaky power but on the lower rev doesn't have the power, the bike feels sluggish even if the numbers suggest otherwise. For this bike I would say yeah, even on the mid-range and all that, the power is definitely there, and which was not there on the previous Z800. I definitely have to check the dyno scores or something, that the graphs, but I think this bike made more than the 5 PS gain that it was supposed to. I mean, it's not just a 5 PS cane. On paper it may be 5 PS, but on that dyno chart it may be a lot more. So back to some high-speed riding. Okay, this time I was more prepared for the braking and we did good. You know, the best part about the Z900 is that they've kind of gotten over the problems of having a inline 4, which usually was meaning that, oh my god, I had to stand on the foot pegs to avoid those bumps. The previous inline 4s were like all the peaky powered, high screaming engines, and I think they have addressed that with this motorcycle. And it was already there in the Z1000, and the rev range, the power band was very wide, and that's what made the 800 and the 1000 so vastly apart. 1000 I believe was also 10 kgs lighter. But this one right now has lost 20 kgs, and it does have a different frame. So Kawasaki has completely re-engineered the chassis of the motorcycle, and I think after the engine, the chassis is the most important part in a motorcycle, and it is also often overlooked because a chassis actually gives the motorcycle its riding dynamics or its handling capabilities. So it should not be ignored.